and welcome to Planning Commission tonight. Looks like we have 5 commissioners in the building right now, and Camry's online joining us. And we don't know why the other's not here, but could be here any minute. So we'll see. So welcome. Glad to have you here. I've asked Commissioner Perry to give us a rare inspirational thought.
Inspirational thought?
Either one. Either one.
I'll just say it.
Okay.
Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful we can be here tonight as commissioners and be able to discuss the things we need to do for the city and make the right decisions for it. And bless all of us around, make the right decisions. We say this humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. And I say Commissioner Perry, and I meant Commissioner Adams, but you knew who I was talking about, so, oh well. All right, so public forum. Wow, lots of public here.
Oh, do you want to approve that? We just approve the
Oh,
minutes
we
from
need to
last
approve
time?
the consent agenda, yes.
Just submitted, yeah, just.
So did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from the 28th of May?
Yeah,
Yep.
Any issues, comments, or concerns? None?
let's make a motion to approve the minutes from the May 28th meeting.
Nice, Commissioner. And we have Commissioner Gedbor up for the second, so we'll take a vote. All in favor? No, we have to do a roll call because Camry's online. Camry, it's Commissioner Brinkerhoff.
Yes, sorry. Took me a minute to unmute.
No, Commissioner Hamuli,
Yes,
Commissioner Frisbee.
Yes.
Brain turned dead. Commissioner Gedbor
Yes.
and Commissioner Adams.
Yes.
Commissioner Beecher, yes. Okay, that passed. Public forum. Are you going to tell us anything from the public? You just want to be staff tonight is all you're going to be. Okay, no public forum then. Nobody's online, obviously, so. Okay, we'll turn the time over to our planner. And he can tell us about this subdivision change.
You have probably seen this somewhat familiar before, but the applicant didn't have the capabilities to record the plat as was required with the plat amendment. And so the intent here is to create a new plat, more or less the same as what you'd seen before. So I'll pull it up for everyone. So this is the WICP Payson Tech Plat B, if approved. So up here where the cursor is, this is the other 2 lots that were originally in the subdivision, and then this lot here and this lot here. And so their plan is to vacate lots 1 and 2 on this plat, which are lots what on the? 2 and 3. So they're lots 2 and 3 in the original plat. Yes, the agenda says 3 and 4. That was a typo. So it's lots 2 and 3 that would be vacated from the original plat to create this plat. This plat's creation would just be an administrative decision by staff. So it's just your obligation tonight is to consider this for the vacation. Any questions on this?
Does that make sense to everybody?
so yeah, what is staff's recommendation?
Staff recommends approval. It's really just semantics of how it's being recorded, and this is the way they chose to record it, despite the fact that we already did the plat amendment process a few months ago.
Vacated an easement and all the other
Yep.
good stuff, so. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion then.
I move we approve the subdivision
Turn your
plat.
mic on.
Man, there we go. I move we approve the subdivision plat for WICP Tech 3 LLC, finding that it conforms to all city ordinances, and there's no conflicts with the general plan based off the request.
And you
could
were
I
talking
re-
about a plat vacation, correct?
There we go.
Yes.
Okay,
Vacating the plat. So
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. We'll start with Commissioner Adams,
Yes.
Commissioner Gettebor,
yes.
Commissioner Beecher, yes. Commissioner Frisbee.
Yes.
Commissioner Hamuli.
Yes.
And Commissioner Brinkerhoff.
Yes.
Okay, that will be back in staff's hand to take care of
Okay.
and get that done. And then we have a work session, and I assume Michael's going to do that as well. So
Marty wants to do it.
I think Marty just had fear run across her face.
She didn't respond quick enough. I thought there was going to be some fear there.
Well, I do want to, but I would hate to take the privilege away from Michael for this.
Now the question is, why won't it let me share the screen I'm looking for? Oh, there it is. Okay, so as you recall, we've been working on this for a few meetings now. We had in the packet and on the agenda, including various portions of the code and the what is this? Appendix A. So Appendix A, we wanted to kind of give you to take home and look at and kind of digest. Just for your information on Appendix A, we've done various additions to this in the last year. And I don't know if most of the Planning Commission was on at that time, so they would have known that. So if you just want to look at sections going forward, then it would start on professional services. Otherwise, you're welcome to look throughout the whole thing. Anything you want to discuss on the Appendix A tonight, or do we want to just do that as homework and then we'll get into the others? I saw a nod of a head over there.
Homework sounds
Another
good.
time.
Yeah. Homework sounds great.
Homework sounds okay.
Okay.
Anybody else have a problem with that? Okay, let's do that, Michael.
So this is kind of the big one as far as districts go. It's the RMF multifamily zone. So I'm going to pull that up. It will actually do it. Oh, it pulls it up on my screen, but not everybody else's. Okay. So I will just stop sharing and then share my other screen and it'll pull it up that way. Okay, so the residential multifamily zone. This is the zone where we really wanted to look at things that might be ways to incentivize good design, good product, good layouts, things like that. And we really don't have that in this code right now. We do have things talking about required open space and amenities, things like that. And I know that most of you probably haven't been able to read this thoroughly. So we're just going to look at sections in this and stop me if there's things that you want to look at a little bit further. I don't think we need to do much with the purpose and zone characteristics. So right now, these are the uses permitted and conditionally permitted in the zone. So permitted are the ones you can see, conditional are going to be below that next paragraph. Any feedback there? We still okay with that?
That was the intent as far as I remember. So,
I'm not quite sure why keeping of animals is in there.
on a big enough lot, that's okay, but it's on there, so.
I think I would recommend striking that, but it doesn't include pets. So, and I guess
I
think there's
have no
regulations
issue
on
with that.
state
Anybody
law
else have any
about
issue with that?
I did not look at
therapy animals. So, yeah,
Right.
there's no reason to have that. That seems strange. So I'm just making a note in the PowerPoint where I've been keeping all those notes. Okay. Conditional uses, religious buildings, educational facilities, residential facilities for elderly, and public and private utility maintenance facilities. Accessory uses, storage facilities for equipment, except for legal non-conforming uses, accessory structures for the housing of animals or poultry. We can probably get rid of that too.
Yeah, if we get rid of the animals, we can get rid of B.
Yeah, because again, pets are not going to be
No.
a concern here, so we'll get rid of that one too. Minimum project area. Thoughts on that?
And that's a pretty low. I, I'm not sure why we need a minimum project area for an RMF zone, but
Okay.
I didn't have a problem with 5 acres. I wasn't like.
yeah,
was
5
there
acres
some-
isn't that
Is
much,
there
but
some
I'm not
reason
sure
to
why
do
it's.
5 acres?
On like
Do
a
you?
1 acre
You
lot
think
or
so?
something like
On a
that,
w-
that
you
becomes
you think we'll have that?
but 10 units or, yeah.
All right, that makes sense. That makes sense.
I think that comes into play with, we talked about the RM or the R275, and perhaps that R275 could be a little more dense for example, townhouses up to a certain number building, but there's no reason to have a multifamily densities in pockets all over the place.
So, so the 5 acres is probably a good limit as a minimum.
Density calculations. We've had various comments from applicants that have wanted different densities, and so that might be a reason for us to consider that here. For example, council approved a zone change for RMF 10 in the Hyatt Creek Plat C area that's just west of Redbridge, and the applicant requested, as part of the zone change, they said we'll do a reduction down to 6. So there might be some reasoning to have maybe a smaller units per acre kind of a situation. But there also might be some reason to have more. Any feedback you guys want to share on that?
I think right now, as far as max units, we're good unless we really see a need for it. I don't see a need in going higher than 20. That's pretty dense for at least Payson area. And I think as soon as you put it out there at 25 or 30, then you start getting people like, oh, well, that means I can find a place to cram a bunch in there. I don't know that Payson's quite ready for
We have the transit overlay zone, which would allow, I think, Jill, is it up to 50 units per acre?
Yeah.
Okay. But that one would be, and that
So-
would be the mechanism that we would propose going higher than this amount. 6 units per acre might actually be a little low,
Right.
but just some food for thought there.
Well, and the RMF 10 is up to 10, so
That's not how developers read it.
I know.
Yeah.
It's minimum of, that's how they read.
Could we control that with a development agreement, though? We'll give you
Oh,
RMF
yeah.
10, but we're going to do a development agreement, and
Yep.
that
Sure.
will restrict or change. So I don't know that rewriting a whole code for a new one at this point makes sense, at least.
Yeah, I think this section is actually pretty decent, especially because the paragraph below talks about net density, and that's how we do it. The only thing that I would say is maybe we reduce these units per acre and we do it on a gross density, because that seems to be what developers are basing their numbers on, is gross density. So
That would be correct. Developers want to do it on gross,
But-
not on net.
My concern with that is each project's gross or the net acreage on gross is not proportional. You might have one project that has 10 acres with 8 acres usable, and you might have one that has 10 acres with 6 acres usable. So as soon as we start doing it off gross density, then you have all sorts of challenges for how do we limit units. At least that's my thought when we start talking gross.
Because we've seen a lot of projects in areas that have wetlands.
Right.
Yeah, and
Utilize, and do they get full credit, credit with density for all of the undevelopable area, or is it a certain percentage of the development area? Yes.
so that would be my concern with switching to gross is how do you regulate that individual projects?
Yeah, the gross would need, if you're going to go to gross, it would have to be usable gross versus unusable, and the unusable might still get a percentage, but it would be much lower
Yeah.
value. So if you had 10 acres of wetlands, that only counts for 3 or whatever.
So then do we just create a hazard for ourselves by trying to go to gross versus
Yeah.
net?
Well, and that's why I'm saying it
Yeah.
is that
I
that would
think-
be,
I think it's just something that we just got to continue to remind developers that these calculations are based off of net density.
You got to show us what's buildable, and then we'll calculate it off of that. And when we're talking net, are we talking roadways and stuff as well? Or are we excluding? Okay, so they're not getting penalized for roadways and stuff. They're just, if it's undevelopable land, wetland or whatever, that's the not considered
or
net.
or hillside that's too steep
Correct.
or that kind of stuff.
So
Okay.
I don't understand your statement of not getting penalized. I mean,
Well, we're counting the roads as part of their net acreage, so.
no, we don't.
We're not. Okay, that's what I want to know is if they have to build like down by the temple where they want that nice wide corridor, and somebody's building that project, then the project obviously doesn't include that, which it shouldn't, because they're gonna deed that over to the city. It wouldn't be part of their project anyway, would be my guess.
Yeah, so for example, a typical project, about 30% of that is going to be needed for public utilities, infrastructure, roads, things like that. And so that is not included as part of the density calculation. So net acreage is the usable land after utilities, infrastructure, roads, and non-buildable areas. Okay, I don't think there's any real concern about project width. We did have something that came in fairly close with this width on the Spring Creek Landing, if you remember that behind Jimmy John's. They were probably right around the 200, very close. But maybe this is a good size stipulation that you're not going to just have these flag lot style multifamily developments too. So feedback on that, concerns?
Well, if we're talking 5 acres and only have to have 200 feet of frontage, that's a
That's
Pretty
that's not much.
deep lot. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's,
I think we're gonna have to look at that with this update, is we're gonna have to really look at the dimensions. They work right.
Did they make sense?
so, but the minimum is, but yeah, if you're talking that, hey, our minimum is 5 acres, then only having to have 200 feet of frontage is pretty drastic. So,
Be a big, deep lot. And frontage is the same thing, more or less, with that same distance. There is availability for single family in this zone.
So, sorry, I got lots of comments because I was making notes, but my question on this is if we're at 6,500 square foot and we're supposed to be RMF 10, we're not even close. So do we really need to consider smaller lot size if we're going to put them in an RMF zone?
That's a good question. And that might be something to consider with this zone. The only concern I have with that is it going to be an opportunity where somebody wants the RMF zone so they can do 3,000 square foot lots? And are we okay with that?
And that's something I think we need to look at. Is it 3? Is it 4? Is it, because if you did 4,000 square foot lots, I mean, obviously you cut roads and stuff out, you're about 8 units to an acre. And could you intersperse that with condos, small single family and kind of do a mix in there by allowing more single family? No, it doesn't, because this limits to 65, but that's what I'm saying. Should we consider, I mean, obviously the city council gets final say on it, but
I think there ought to be a consideration for some smaller.
a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot lot to where we could have some small, and then we start getting affordable homes. We're mixing that in with
There is a
high
big market
density.
for that.
So the biggest thing with single family lots would be that police and fire often want to see is at least a minimum frontage on the street. And then also public utilities has concerns with cramming in those utilities and getting the proper separation between those.
Okay.
But we do have the smallest that's allowable for, say, twin homes is 50 feet of frontage. And so perhaps that could be a minimum.
And then make them single family small instead of, and I'm not thinking a whole development of this, but interspersing it with, like I said, 3-story condos plus a bunch of single family and, you know, kind of a community that way. So,
You can use that, yes. Yes.
okay. And get the density bonus that way. And the,
Interest in that or request for that.
I think it's okay that we leave this one as it is for now. The reason being is the legislature might force our hand next year because they
They
had
may.
a bill that didn't pass that was going to require the minimum lot size in all residential zones to be 6,000 square feet, which didn't make much sense. Why do you have zones with different lot sizes if the minimums have to all be the same? But anyways, so this is probably okay leaving for now. Setbacks, any thoughts there? Okay.
There's, back on the lot width size, there's a large demand in a lot of areas for lots that have just essentially their house. No real yard, no nothing. There's a lot of those selling. And that's something we might need, and they're 40 to 45 foot width is their width of those lots.
And we would talk to some, it was Eagle Mountain, right, Jill? Is that who it was? Eagle Mountain or Saratoga? Anyways, what they were doing is basically like a private drive that did 4 to 6 lots. And all the lot was maybe 3,500 square feet, and 2,500 square feet of that was house.
Right.
And the idea was you have a teeny bit of a yard to let your dog run around in the back, but otherwise it's all house. And those are quite popular.
Yeah, I'm thinking vineyard, all those ones.
The hardest thing comes.
Saratoga's the same kind of thing. They've got the same things out there.
Mhm. Kind of like a little pod, and all of them
Yeah.
have the same drive approach.
Vineyard does all of theirs off of a public road, but it's a narrow public road. Unfortunately, I don't particularly like that, but
All of them are narrow anymore.
About, the feedback we've got from other departments, because we have a few of those pods that he's describing already in town. We have
Right.
in Maplesburg side, we have some up at Hidden Grove, and so there's a few areas around the city. They've actually created some problems with public safety. So I think any of it needs to be fully vetted. I mean, I know a lot of other cities are doing that, and, you know, whether or not it's working well in their cities, or if they have also come to find that there's been some challenges with that, with long-term maintenance
uh,
and delivery of services. But yeah, we would need to, fully vet that with the other departments, because even getting down to that 6,500 feet with that 65 feet of frontage. I mean, that was a very detailed, lengthy discussion with multiple departments in the city to
Uh-huh.
make sure that we had a frontage for the lots in order to maintain the services and have open access to those services.
I'm just going to put a note in the comments to discuss with city departments about tiny lots.
yeah, some of those vineyard lots are less than 3,500. They're 40 feet wide by 75 feet deep. That's it. So, and every single one of those homes is full. I'm not sure I like it,
And it comes back to
but it's a discussion we ought to have.
discussion about it. But we don't have to be all.
No, we don't. We don't have to be all things to everybody,
You know,
but
like Michael said, the state legislature may, you know, pass some laws that may require us to make some changes.
right.
No concerns, I assume, with projections into setbacks. That's pretty standard.
That's typical for the other zones we have as well. So it's, I don't know, see why we would change it here.
There's been some talk about building height and maybe rewording this. Not that it would necessarily reduce the height. It might even increase the height, but the idea is rephrasing it a little bit because it's kind of clunky. So
You gonna let AI write it, Ben?
Oh, please don't.
Sometimes it actually,
Until lawyers start quoting cases, citing cases that never existed.
well, yeah, but
Guys or ladies, just, that's not right.
So I'll just put that in there about consider refining.
Now, this is just in our residential stuff right here. This is not like our commercial? Or is this building?
this is RMF.
There's similar language to this in the commercial.
Okay, well,
And we already talked about that might need to be modified in the commercial. Because some of that doesn't make any sense in the commercial.
we need to be ready to be able to go higher.
Right.
In our residential, we've got more of
Well,
a,
and the multifamily residential should probably follow suit with commercial.
Yeah.
Because usually they're close by.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I would change on that is maybe the height. Instead of 43, I'd go to 45, just in case somebody uses floor trusses. Those are anywhere from 14 to 16 inches deep instead of 12. And that's starting to gain a lot of traction in the building market.
It helps with HVAC and power and all those kind of things
Yeah.
instead of a I-beam, a truss. And
It would still keep it short enough to where you wouldn't be able to get an extra level in there, but it would give them flexibility in using different product and building types.
yeah. I actually like using trusses if I can.
Yeah.
So,
So I'll just include that in that same note. But part of the language there is potentially the fire chief can,
can say no.
Mhm.
Yep.
so, okay.
And you know, the height needs to be determined by what they can protect as well. So obviously they got to have a big say in the height of a structure.
I think that's primarily why we have the 4-story. There might be 5-story in a few places, but it's because of ladder trucks and things like that to be able to actually rescue someone in an emergency.
Right.
All right, distance between buildings, any thoughts on that? That's pretty standard that we've had for quite some time. I don't see any need to change it, but
No.
permissible lot coverage, this one might need to have some sort of language.
If we're going to smaller lots, that might need to have some talk about. Because 40% does not mean you're gonna have a small lot. Unless you have a storage shed as a house.
Tiny home on a tiny lot.
Unless we're starting to sell container houses, that's
Yeah.
not gonna work.
Okay, so I just put the note to consider revising that section.
Okay.
Open space. This is one that I think we'd like to see refined, and my thoughts are it might be useful to have when we get our consultant or whoever we're going to do to help us rewrite this, give us some feedback on what would be advisable. Any feedback from the planning commission on this?
It's my favorite topic.
Yes,
Um,
it is.
So just this, we have the comment in here that other impervious surfaces, but if we talk about a sports court and stuff, that's impervious, right? And that should count as open space. So I think using impervious surfaces in this case actually creates a problem because I would count, hey, they're going to put in a sports court, that should count towards their stuff. But then we just use the term usable open space. And that's how do we define usable and who's defining usable? So that I'm not sure how to best do that, but when we just say, oh, it has to be usable open space.
Let's hear the lawyer definition of usable.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to legal speak, what's the developer going to say? Well, you just said usable. The dog can use it or the birds can use it. What?
We want to hear a usable definition.
I think the intent of that word is to be usable by the general public for recreational opportunities.
And so maybe specifying that it just has to be, yeah.
Yeah, opposed to the clear definition of where it's not usable is wetlands that all you can do is
See,
look at it and hear the
mosquitoes.
Or
you hear
if
mosquitoes?
it's an alley down the back of the buildings, is it usable? I mean, where do we get to usable there? And then the stormwater basins, that's my other, you've heard me beat on those a lot. I just propose maybe we put something that they can't be used for more than 50% of the open space requirement, or put some restriction
So
there.
there is something in there about it. I think, let's see.
That was when I read it. I didn't find anything. So I think if we just limit that, hey, that you can use it for no more than, so even if it's usable for soccer, whatever else, no more than 50% of a storm basin can be counted towards your open space requirement. Because I don't want to be like, I'm just going to build a storm basin, it's the whole frontage of the development. Oh, that's all the open space I got to put in. And That's all you got.
It also depends on how that's constructed.
Right.
Whether it's riprap walls or whether it's all grass at 10-to-1 slopes,
So-
you know, that,
But I'm trying to cut out the Weasley,
I know, I know. It's
Well,
just something you have to consider is how it's built.
Yeah.
Because
And that, it talks about that in here about what it requires
Yeah,
to be
it's-
considered open space.
It just has, that it has to be at least 10% of the required open space, so we really don't want.
We don't want a little teeny one and we're gonna count that.
Yeah.
And that's good.
But maybe we put
need to
some
have a
language
max
for
as
a
well that
maximum.
say-
Yeah.
So yeah, we don't want you to have this little teeny storm base and, oh, we're counting that. But also don't want to have, like I said, the whole development being the basin.
Right.
Again, this is personal preferences when I look at it, but just.
I'm just gonna find out when Ryan's birthday is so I can make him a t-shirt that just says open space. But I mean, it's valid. If it's vague, then, you know, we should, on the time that he's on planning commission, I would think that he'd want to narrow that, or, you know, nail that down, you know, by ordinance and stuff to be able to get that changed. And I think he will say it every time, so we should just put that on the short list of things to make sure that Ryan Frisbee gets done before he steps down at some point and becomes a pilot full time.
Landscaping,
I actually think it might need some wordsmithing, but it's actually fairly well laid out, in my opinion.
I don't think there's a lot of real concern with what's there, so. Parking, loading, and access. I think we have people complain about that every single city council meeting.
Yep.
Whenever they want to come in and talk about that. So something, and I don't know if we can do this, maybe this is an attorney question, but oftentimes there's a required amount of parking for the development, but then the landlords or whatever they call themselves, property management group, charge people for an individual stall on a monthly or yearly basis, and people may or may not want to do that, and so then they park out on the street.
Right.
And you might have a half-empty parking lot because people aren't using those. And I think that might be something that we should try to discourage in whatever way, shape, or form that we can.
So what I've seen is a lot of them, you get your 2 parking stalls with your unit, and then any additional stall, if you want 3 or 4, you're paying a premium for additional parking.
That ought to be covered in their HOAs, you know, if they're gonna have a parking structure, they ought to have that, like they say, at least 2 stalls per.
Well, right now
unit.
it's 2.1 stalls per unit. I think it's the cities, right? It's
2 1/4.
2 1/4. Yeah.
But yes, I think that if we can, Brandon, any thoughts on that?
To enforce it, you gotta actually
Well, I mean,
use them. I guess maybe I'm not
I,
understanding.
so we've just had the situation arise, and it's been told to us many times that people don't use their parking because the apartment owners are charging extra money for a stall, when really they should be allowed a minimum 1-2 stalls per unit, and any excess they could be charged for example. That's, I
I think
guess.
it's something, yeah, we have to include in the code. But I know what you're talking about. I've run into it. So I think it's a matter of enforcement, make it more expensive to park on the street. How much are they?
I don't know.
I don't know. That's exactly. They're not paying for the different.
So
there's.
So the
that
question becomes, can we put it in the code that required parking for multifamily housing cannot be charged?
And what they're gonna do is they're just gonna.
They're gonna up the
raise
rent.
They're just gonna raise the rent, but again, if you're paying for the service, you're paying for the service. That's what it is.
And I don't know, it's probably not possible, but is there any way in these like development agreements to say that they're also responsible to enforce resident parking on the frontage of their property? So that if their residents are parking on the frontage, but where that's on a public street, that's probably not something we can have them. Just be like, you're responsible if your residents are parking here to make sure they're not parking illegally. I don't know, but
I think that the issue with raising the rent is a concern, but it's harder to justify for the apartment entities, because if market rate for an apartment is 1,200 and they're charging 1,500 because they're capturing that extra for a parking stall, then they're not as competitive with others that maybe aren't charging for parking stalls.
Yeah, and if they're charging $300 a month for a parking stall, they ought to be shot.
but
How much for parking stall?
oh, he was just throwing. But I like your idea of
In
just
an
saying
apartment
that.
in Payson.
Yeah.
Right. I was gonna say, in New York, yeah, we won't talk about how much.
We're not talking about that. We're not talking about LA. We're not talking about,
Oh, yes,
okay, we're talking about Payson,
Yeah.
Utah.
right. Nope. That should not be.
But I did like Michael's idea that maybe that it just includes that RMF 10 has to include 2 parking stalls per unit at no additional charge for occupants. And if we could put that in the code, then at least you got 2 of those that are included. And the management company can figure out how they want to.
How they want
Expense
to pay
that.
for that.
Yeah.
But Michael, maybe we can work with the engineering department is maybe we need to get some drone shots of the multifamily in the city and see.
How the parking is utilized.
Or, I mean, yeah, because, I mean, if you're seeing that everyone's parked on the street and there's 30 parking stalls in the development that are unused, I mean, I think maybe we gather some information then.
Yeah.
That could maybe help us with the code amendment. Because if they're gonna charge for it, and people aren't going to use it, why would we require it?
Right.
And because it's just impervious surface that causes other issues, or it's not being utilized, and that land can be utilized for something different. But, I mean, it doesn't help with the parking problems that we have in some areas of our community, but.
Yeah.
But it is frustrating that it's a requirement because we want to get the
parking
vehicles
off.
the street. And because they're charging, they're back on the street.
Right.
You know, so it's just this code requirement is just failing because there's this charge.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's more than they are. They're $25. So get a parking ticket, pay $25. Maybe you get it
Once a month or
once a
something.
month.
Cheaper than paying.
right.
The other thing is, and we've talked about this before, is a lot of these 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, they have 3 and 4 vehicles because you have multiple people driving that age. So the lot could be totally full and they're still just overflowing on the street because there's not adequate parking for everybody. So I guess kind of along Jill's point, we need to see, are the lots full in the overflow or are the lots empty and they're just out there for price? It'd be interesting to see.
Well, and maybe the code needs to be written, or if it can be written, that if the unit is used by more than 2 adults, then they are required to have additional parking stalls for those.
I don't know how they regulate that.
I don't
when
know
we
how you
build, though.
regulate it,
Yeah.
but something like that would be advantageous because there is a lot of what Ryan said.
Because then the builder's going to say, oh, well, all these units are only for single families with 2 adults and we don't want to have additional parking. But then in reality, when they rent them out, it becomes a
Especially because there's gonna be one renter and they're gonna have their
subletting.
3 or 4 friends live with them and
Right.
they pay rent to the
Yeah.
renter, right? So. And
Yeah, the
they're
contract is to one person. So they're like, oh, we just have one.
Unrelated.
as long as it's more than 4, right? Cause like
You can regulate unrelated. You can't regulate
Regulate.
family.
Right.
But then-
family can mean all people related by blood, marriage, adoption, blah, 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 and up to 4 other unrelated persons.
That was that definition we went over
That's-
several months ago.
Yeah, that was a definition we didn't like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty ridiculous.
And then
For
enforcement.
this very reason.
Yeah. how do you enforce that? Because are you going to be like, okay, we're monitoring these developments to see how many people are going in and out?
Students, right?
I don't know how they enforce it.
They just ticket everybody.
Well, yeah, I mean, ticketing.
They write lots of tickets. Yeah.
I know they have dedicated code enforcement team.
Mhm.
We just have Officer Mark Carson.
We have one guy, don't we?
Yeah, that
And-
does it
and-
part-time.
But I mean, ultimately, that could pay the salary of of a full-time person if that's all they're doing is writing traffic tickets or parking tickets.
Parking tickets.
What would you look into, because I know that it was even litigated.
Yes. It's been well litigated.
Of the, I don't know what the legal, what the ruling
The,
was.
the
but I know
definition
that-
is actually different if you have a university or college in your city boundaries or something.
Well, we do kind of now, almost.
We're gonna have two by the time you get through.
Right.
You gotta have the south end and the north end, so you gotta kind of control this coming at us. Get it.
All right, I think we've massacred that one enough.
The only other thing on parking is we cannot throw away RV parking on any more or any more developments.
This is a thing where I think incentivizing the development. So we know from experience that people still have RVs and live in apartments.
That's correct.
So what if we, for example, incentivize them saying you can get 1 or 2 more units per acre if you put in X square footage for RV parking?
That's not a bad idea.
That's realistic.
Because we know it's going to happen. We might as well try to get the desired result that we want.
Right. Because, you know, 1 in 3 or 4 are going to have an RV. They're going to have a boat. They're going to have a trailer. They're going to have snowmobiles. They're going to have watercraft.
And they could charge for those spots. Be like, hey, we're gonna just if you were to take it to the storage unit, we can charge for that and be like, we're gonna, but make some money off of those at least.
That should be addressed.
But we can't approve anything anymore that doesn't have some provision for RV parking. And maybe like the way you say to do it is to incentivize them a little bit.
And I know you're ready to be done with parking, but I have one more. I don't like the last sentence that says any additional parking must be approved by city council due to a loss of the amount of landscaping. As long as they meet the landscaping requirement, if they want to build 10 or 20 extra stalls, why do we care? Now, if it's going to be at a sacrifice to try to get a reduced landscaping requirement, then that would be an issue. But I don't understand why we're making them jump through hoops for anything beyond the minimum, because at least when I read that sentence, if I do anything besides the minimum, I have to go to city council to get it approved.
I think that should be rephrased that if they are proposing to reduce the landscaping,
So I just think you could eliminate it because the landscaping requirement is not an option. You have to do this much landscaping. And if you want to build extra parking but still meet the landscaping, then you're fine. But anyway, reworded however, but
maybe just keep that and then strike out the second sentence.
yeah, that it's just that this is the minimum and we're just letting you know this is the bare minimum you got to have.
Right.
Yeah. But it just feels like you were making it really hard to add additional parking, which seems like a dumb idea.
Which seems like that's backwards from what we really want.
Yeah.
All right, project amenities. I think this is laid out okay. I just think that this comes back into the incentivizing thing. Now, these are the requirements, but if they do more or more,
If they only have 30 units and they put a clubhouse in, they ought to
Right.
get something for that.
right,
Yes.
Now, the hard thing is, well, if you give them more density because they put the clubhouse in, then really you're just getting more dense, and then they need to have more amenities.
Yep.
So I don't know that this is the right place to do it, but I think we require enhanced design requirements, and the enhanced design requirements would therefore maybe allow for increased density as well. Because I think
With
that-
additional items that they bring into the.
Right. And the idea being that the more attractive a development is, the more long-term integrity that that development will have.
Right.
So, any other thoughts on amenities?
Scroll down just a little further there. We talk about in place of a clubhouse there, number 4, having a larger social outside function area. My question is there is, do we still require to have restrooms available for that outdoor social function area? Because the clubhouse required restrooms. Should we say, hey, well, you also need to have restrooms for people using this area, provided whether they be attached to a building or detached, I don't know, but provide some sort of a restroom facility if they choose that option.
It's a good idea.
So, sorry, I'm like dominating. I feel like I'm talking
Oh,
way
you're
too
good.
much. I'm like,
You're good.
so.
If somebody else has something to say, they'll not, they're not shy. They'll step in and do it. There could be some additional things there, yeah. Like in the 30 units, you got to put a few picnic tables out. That's not really that much. That's an extra $1,000 on the project.
They
That's
just
not
approved a
everything.
40-foot breezeway with a small playground for 40 units. So come on.
An asphalt playground and
Yeah.
no less. It's
So picnic tables is probably a bonus.
It might need some wordsmithing, but I basically just took that section and I added, this includes adequate restroom facilities for the anticipated peak use of the open space.
okay. And then Jill's suggestion that maybe we need to think about the fact that some of these are kind of wimpy. We're not really having them do anything, especially in the lower areas.
We saw this in, South Haven Farms on the east side of the community, just east of hospital. They knew they were gonna have multiple phases,
Right,
and so they decided to consolidate.
right,
So instead of, okay, this development of 210 apartments has to do their 2,000 square foot,
right.
clubhouse, and then we allowed them through a development agreement on that one. It was sort of that, well, let's test it and see if it works well. And I think it did. They ended up just consolidating everything, and then they had agreements between each of the neighborhoods that they could all utilize the same facilities. And I think.
How is that working? Do we know?
I'd have to ask the developer, from a logistics standpoint, if it's working. I think in the city it worked well because then the quality of size, construction material, everything of the amenities was just increased.
Right,
By having that consolidated together. Now, how it is, because there's 400 units that are utilizing those now. I mean, whether they were sized properly, I don't know. We could ask. But I think giving them the ability to then come in and say, okay, we're going to have these 3 neighborhoods that are all going to utilize this, so then we can provide a larger clubhouse, or we can make it more financially viable
right.
for the residents that will pay into it. I mean, I think there's a lot of different reasons, but that's another thing we could probably reach out to the developer and say, well,
Are they-
did that work? Would you do it again?
Right.
Maybe something different. But I think we're starting to see a lot of developments that are going to be multiple phases.
Mhm.
And maybe it is better to encourage them to consolidate and have better placed amenities or higher quality or even more amenities by doing them up for an overall project instead of just one.
I would agree with that. I can't remember, do they only have left the commercial and
Yes,
retail?
not in southern, South Farms, it's just the commercial pieces that.
Have they submitted anything on that yet?
They've been looking.
Okay.
There's nothing been submitted. I think
Nothing
they're
been submitted,
waiting-
but
I
they've
think
been-
they're waiting for a waiver. But they put a couple of layouts together for their commercial and they're exploring different options, but.
Okay. I just couldn't remember if the residential was all done or not.
The residential. So it's 420 units.
401. We got one lone person out there in a shack or something.
When the townhomes came in, it was 101.
Oh,
So
okay.
everything else was
Perfect. So I don't know if it would work or not. Is there a way to make, so like when somebody puts in utilities along frontage that they don't own, then people have to come back and pay them for those utilities when they do it. Would there be a way to do that with amenities? Say, well, if you put nicer amenities in, when this adjacent lot develops, you can sell them a portion of your amenities and make some of that back by putting in nicer amenities now. I know that gets to be, because that you couldn't force the adjacent developer to do that, but I don't know, just trying to think of creative ways to get better amenities in there that, hey, because if you do this, then several years later, somebody else develops, their amenities are going to cost more. So you could sell yours back to them for a little bit more than you paid for them, but get nicer amenities in the area.
I've seen some systems where it's based off of points. And so the nicer amenities have more points. And then you got to get 150 points worth of amenities. And so like a swimming pool might be worth 100 points or something
So I
like
didn't
that.
know if you could buy into the neighboring, that's what I'm saying, is like almost sell, we'll let you build nicer ones here and then adjacent properties can buy into yours to meet their amenity requirement by sharing those.
A lot of those amenities are paid through, maintenance and everything's
Yeah.
paid through the HOAs. And so if someone
They'd have
across
to
the
join their
street,
HOAs
they'd have
and-
to join that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like that, to get the approval, like you need so many points worth of amenities. And so like a picnic table might be worth 15 points.
Pavilion gives you,
That-
that might not be a bad system. Is go to a-
Instead of what we have listed here is that these are the kind of amenities we want to see. This is what they're worth. You got to get X points
Right.
So
in
you
this
gotta get
class.
2 points per unit.
You
or
can
gotta
pick and
get-
choose whatever you
Yeah,
want to out of
That's
that.
not a bad.
On the target population.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Sure.
Some might be, targeting 55 plus.
Right.
So there might be some amenities that are like, okay, we want to make sure we have this amenities there, because that's what the overpopulation. is
Right.
going to,
Yeah.
want to submit development. I feel
But
like
yeah, that's.
That's
yeah, you
not a
assign
bad
however
idea.
many
That's
points
actually
per
really good.
Unit and.
So I mean, yeah,
I think that's something to explore, definitely.
because yeah, if you say like you got to have 3 barbecue pits out there. Well, what if nobody ever uses those?
Right.
Why not put something that fits the community?
Yeah.
And honestly,
It's a
the,
cheap way to,
yeah.
meet a requirement.
Right. Put something that they want in there then.
Yeah, no, I like
so
that.
here's a thought, and I think I threw this out to you before, but so I'm down to this design standards section, but it loops back to amenities. Perhaps the RMF zone is a minimum density of 10 units per acre. That's it. And they have to do everything that's required. If they want more density, they'll add better design, they'll add more amenities, and they'll add RV parking. Yeah. So they're making more money. We should have a nicer development, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's along the same lines.
Mhm.
So,
anyway, so I just put that as a note on this design standards section.
okay.
Okay.
You need to put in there that all colors should be lavenders and peaches.
Champagne beige.
So, no,
anything else on design?
no. I do like, we're trying to break it up, which is good, but sometimes codifying that is difficult. So codifying something that to give diversity is hard to do. So,
True. I don't know that we've really had too many applicants use this project plan approval, but honestly, I think it would be better if they did.
is this an optional thing?
I believe so. Let's see. Yeah, it's optional.
Well, it shouldn't be in there if it's optional. I mean, if that's what we require, then it shouldn't be optional anymore.
Again, this is something where they could pitch their idea and maybe the city, it's some give and take where city council would say, you do these added amenities, you do this added design, you do this and this, and we'll consider this layout that you've proposed. And then by having some project plan approval, it's at least some element of entitlement for them, which gives them a little bit of a peace of mind, but they'll still have to go through the full site plan review process and such. But feedback on project plan approval, Jill? We really don't see this used much at all. I mean, it's very rough. People will come in with a concept and that's about it, but they don't usually go through this whole process.
If it doesn't say this, it should, that is the way that we should be practicing. Maybe not the concept plan, but maybe not but I guess it just comes down to multifamily, we still process through the planning commission. There's been some changes with state code that changes how we process attached housing and detached single family and things like that. But I think for multifamily, for what you typically see in our map, which is stacked flats and things, we're still requiring as a city, because I believe we still have the ability to reach, where we can't fund some of that. Some other applications are just done at staff level, because that's state law.
So do we know why people aren't using this? Is it an education thing, like they don't know about it? Or is there a penalty, like as far as timing to go through the process? Why aren't they
I think
utilizing
it's
that?
mostly they feel they've got some urgency and so they want to go quickly. But if they did this process and followed it through, it would be more refined and a better product and probably save them time. But most don't. I think maybe what we do is we refine this to be a required process and make sure that all of the steps are what we would want to see throughout.
Whether you require it or there's a bonus of, you get not bumped to the front of the line, but your application doesn't get an extra delay or something to just to kind of encourage the thought that this is the fastest way to do it.
So maybe like expedited review or something like
Yeah.
that. I'm just gonna highlight this and put a note about that.
so maybe it's up there right in the very beginning is that it just needs to say a project plan is required for this zone per the following section. So it's right up there to the very beginning, so they don't think they can skip over it.
Right. Okay. Other requirements. I don't think we really have much to say with this. Nope. I thought it had something to do with design in here, but just has the development agreement stuff.
Just the one question on this one, we've had a discussion before on solid waste containers and stuff like that. Do we even want to allow them to have individual? Because like it makes a comment there about except individual residential containers in an RMF. Should we just not even allow individual?
That's an interesting
Containers.
concept because, as you know, we had the Arrowhead Ranch come to us, the Plat A, which had these townhomes that were fronting onto a narrow private road, and they wanted to do the individual cans that they put into their individual townhomes, opposed to having a community dumpster type of situation.
Right.
I think that makes their product a better product, but also it was some give and take with the sanitation
Well,
department.
solid waste didn't want to go down a road that wasn't public.
Yep. And
I remember that discussion.
And then the idea was that people tend to try to park in there, even if it's just for a minute, quote unquote. And that's when the garbage truck comes by.
Right.
What Arrowhead did to help alleviate those concerns to some degree, and it's still a concern, is they built it, I want to say 26 feet wide, and then they had an extra 2 feet on each side of the townhomes. So it was a total of 30 feet. That 2 feet was just kind of a buffer from the actual private road. And so that was helpful for sanitation. I don't know that we like it necessarily, but I could see it. There's benefits to both, because if you've got a private garbage can, you're probably going to keep your surrounding area cleaner, opposed to just leaving your bags of trash out and maybe you'll get it into the dumpster, you know?
So I think, and I think we're gonna notice with the code update also is, there's a lot of these referenced in the zoning ordinance that is addressed in
Other areas of the,
titles.
Right.
And in some cases they're conflicting. But specifically to the trash cans, that was brought up to the council in the last couple of years. And the solid waste title that's in the city code was actually changed to define when you can have a separate residential can versus.
Okay. And I was gonna say, I thought we've had a conversation a little bit about it before, and that's why I just wasn't sure here.
So
And
I think if this conflicts, or actually it's addressed in the solid waste title.
Right. And then, as we've talked about, well, what if you do smaller lots? If you had a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot lot with individual homes, I don't know that you necessarily want to completely prohibit it, because in that situation, probably an individual can's the smart way to go, because they are. So I was just like, how do you make it work the best? So.
Okay. That is the end of that code chapter. We are just after 7 o'clock. What is everyone's thoughts?
what do you got to do?
So we've got more sections that I was prepared to talk about, but we don't have to talk about them yet. If you'd like to close the meeting.
We do not have a consultant. We don't have a budget yet for a consultant to do this, right?
Correct.
But do we have it budgeted in this year's budget?
Yes.
Okay. So we still have some time.
I'm okay if we don't continue.
Is anybody opposed? Commissioner Brinkerhoff probably is. She's probably
asleep, but you just can't tell.
I am not asleep, Ryan. I'm very offended now, though.
He's on your list now, isn't he?
I know where you live.
Okay, I
think that was a pretty good discussion. So.
that was a good discussion. Let's give us a little bit more warning as to which one you're going to talk about.
So next time, and we'll put it in the agenda, but next time I anticipate doing commercial and industrial development and supplementary provisions.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Staff, anything to report? The 4 staff that are here?
We do have.
Jill and
some-
Brandon, do you have anything to report to us?
We do have some new developments coming to town. A new McDonald's has been approved and will be under construction shortly on 800 South by Popeyes.
Can't wait to see the Facebook comments
The-
about that one.
Hey, at least it'll be easier to get into.
Yes,
Since the other one's turn lane, yeah.
Spring Creek Landing behind Jimmy John's has got their final site plan approval and
Do they?
they're gonna be.
They're
getting
actually gonna
things
build
on.
something?
They're gonna build something, so.
Okay.
That's moving along. We've got some buzz of some other large scale developments coming to town, but we'll keep you informed as they make things public, so.
As it becomes public. Some of them I'm pretty excited about.
Space Center yet down in the. Yep.
So,
So no update on the Space Center then down there in the bowl, right?
There might be one underground, but as far as I know, there's no Space Center plan.
And then the clarification on the McDonald's, that's a second one that's not replacing the
It's
current one.
not, currently, no. We asked that question. The plan is to put a second one.
And
Wow.
just, that's what I was gonna ask. Is it the same franchisee or is it a?
Franchise owner?
Okay. Not that that makes a whole lot of difference, but I'd be ticked off if I owned that one and they let them build one across.
town, that was easier to get into.
Yeah.
Bryce, you talking support two McDonald's?
Just list a whole podcast on Chick-fil-A.
At least you've clarified that. So when my wife asks me, I'll speak, that I know that something's coming besides the Mo Bettas that's now in town. To Mo Bettas? No, because I mean, I knew it was going on, but I was actually out of town, but I'm happy to see just people that are flocking there, to be able to just try and support them, right? Well, and
I
then
went there
again,
like at 2:00.
The secret is you order on the app and you go through the drive-through. It took me like 30 seconds and they gave me freebies. And I was like, score.
and that's the other thing too, is all of us aren't reading Facebook talking about the lack of parking or how other businesses have, like the tired the tired people that are in that same lot coming out and telling people do not park here. This is just for those coming to Big O or whatever. Just they have been pretty adamant about don't park here. This is our space.
Another one that I just remembered is a Seven Brews Coffee is going to be starting construction soon. If you're a coffee drinker, that is also along 800 South. What else we got, Marty? There a few more. Oh yes, Fairfield Hotel and Suites.
Are they getting close?
They've got site plan approval. They're working towards a pre-construction meeting. We just had a meeting this morning with the property owners that own the rest of the development, and they want to try to do the infrastructure improvements at the same time. So we may see some additional restaurant pads and things like that develop in the near future.
Good.
And is that Fairfield going to go in behind?
It's going to be west of Walmart,
West
so
of
right
Walmart.
next to the
Okay.
freeway there.
Okay,
Farthest south of that property.
Yep.
okay. That's good.
There is, on Main Street, the Snapper Mexican Grill, their grand opening is tomorrow night at 6. They're ribbon cutting. I'm not sure exactly what they're gonna have going on, but they moved their main restaurant over to where the Dandy's Pizza was. And then in the little market, they rebranded and having just more like a snack. Lunch.
And the reception center opened up last week.
That's
Reception
true.
Center,
Yep.
yep. Well, they had their.
Their grand opening.
Ribbon cutting. They're not open yet? Oh,
No, they
okay.
don't have their business license yet, but that space looks gorgeous. They did a
Looked nice.
really
Pictures I
good
saw
job.
looked nice. So,
Looking at the building report, May was busy. That was good.
Yeah, the
Like, it
building
was-
report looked like it
I was
picked
like,
up.
wow, Mike, May was awesome.
That's
So,
good.
And then as far as Main Street and the parking behind the library, from what we heard in a staff discussion on Monday, I think they anticipate the pavement to be done in the parking lot mid-July. That doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be open because they might keep it closed to do the landscaping and things like that. I don't recall any feedback on when they anticipate the road to be finished. Obviously, a huge target date would be for Onion Days, but we'll see how that.
They're not gonna be open for Scottish Festival,
They meaning who?
Main Street,
I don't know that. When is Scottish Festival?
like second week of July,
11th
isn't
and
it?
12th of July.
They might have the paving done by then. If they're getting the paving done in the parking lot, they might have the paving done on the road. But I didn't hear that. So
Like the library parking lot's only how many months behind schedule now? They had major.
part of it, I think, was they
delays
were
with their-
waiting on equipment pieces to. Again, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a public works guy, but whatever, maybe storm drainage equipment,
They had
whatever.
storm
that they-
drain and sewer that they had to get through
Yeah.
that they didn't know about to begin with.
Gotcha. I just know it ended up being some extra delays that they're like, oops.
Yeah.
About the new business center in the MTech.
No, go for it.
At the MTech building, I guess Payson City has leased about 3,000 square feet, I believe, for a. new
It's
business
a
center.
innovation center.
Okay, innovation center. It's,
Which
Oh.
will give like tech support for people
Mhm.
and
All
do
kinds of
like
stuff.
maker space and startups and stuff like that.
If any of you happen to have an idea for equipment you'd like to see there, the city would like to know that now, if you know that,
Laser cutters, 3D printers.
those kind of things. Yeah, that's exactly what they're talking about.
Yep.
So I was just in a meeting this morning that we talked about that, so.
Nice.
I think that's a decent update on things. Any questions for us?
Not that I can think of. Any commissioner comments or thoughts? Commissioner Brinkerhoff, did you have anything?
Nope, I'm good, just listening.
Would you like to make the last motion?
Yeah, can we make a motion to adjourn?
We can.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. That's good. Thank you, Camry.
Yep, thanks for letting me join virtually tonight.
No problem. Glad you were
Sure.
able to.
Yep.